we go. I really appreciate Dave's story. You get the full conversion story with him, and for those of us that are lucky enough to follow him early on and kind of watch this transition, and that's the power again of YouTube or of social media, of the internet. You see these stories from people, and you get drawn in, and it's spiritual, and it changes you, right? And to watch him and what he did and just those steps that he made consistently was really something. All right, the story of Quick Media. Now, it's not CWIC. All right, it's not CWIC, it's not CWIC. I'll go over what it means a little bit more in a second and where we come up with it. But this is very much me and my wife, and she's my biggest supporter, she's my biggest fan, she's the reason I'm able to do this. She is, in many ways, the emotional support, every bit of support. She's also my sugar mama. So, and I'll go over that in a minute. Okay. Ignorance, that's not supposed to be there yet. Okay, here we go. So Quick Media started off as something very different. Back in 2012, I started a little website called Mormonato. And you can see the little hat on the end there. That hat is kind of one of those low-profile Clint Eastwood, Zorro type of hats, right? And I thought, this is really cool. I went to Mexico on my mission. I'm going to go with Mormonato. And that was the name of the website. I had about 1,000 links on it. I did end up taking it down. I have it on a hard drive somewhere. But when I redid my website, I was like, well, I'm just going to move everything over. And of course, I've never done that. But originally, Quick Media was Mormonato. And it was something I did in my free time. I was fascinated with the gospel, studied it all the time, fascinated with the culture, history, philosophy, etc. And I wanted to get my opinion out there, right? So Mormonato was a platform for me to be able to do that. Something happened a little later. Let me back up on this for a second here. My wife's going to be mad at me for this, but Carden really wanted to see this. So this is 2015. I'd been running with the Mormonato website for a few years, just kind of adding things to it all the time. This is me and my boys in Tahoe in 2015. This is 2016. So 2016, I had been constantly having these heart issues. I'm like, what is going on? I'm in all this pain. I don't know what's happening. And I'd go to basketball, and I played a lot of basketball, and I'd go out and I'd play, and I had this massive pain in my heart. And I'm like, well, I just got to play through it. It's like a cramp or something. I got to go through it. I'd go to the doctor. They'd hook me up on all the wires, and there's nothing wrong with you. There's not a problem at all. And I climbed Huayna Picchu, above Machu Picchu with my son. I had to lay down all day on the grass in Machu Picchu, and I couldn't even enjoy it. And my son had to walk around all by himself. Something's wrong. I ended up at a young men's camp where I was a young men's advisor, and we're in the White Mountains of Arizona. And I'm pedaling on my mountain bike going, and I'm falling behind all these guys. I'm like, this is not right. I don't like this. I am competitive. And I'm falling behind, and all of a sudden that pain came back again. And I get off my bike because I can't stand it any longer. I just can't stand it. And I laid back. I remember laid back on all the pine needles. And I look up, and all I could see are trees. And I'm thinking, if I have a heart attack right here, there is no possible way they could even airlift me out of here. Nothing can come here. I'm done. It's over. So the next day, maybe 2 days later, I went in, I got a stress test, they ran it, they let me run for 3 minutes, and they yanked me off, and they said, get off. And a couple days later, I was in the hospital with triple bypass surgery. This is my wife. A broken heart and a very contrite spirit. I remember, and President Nelson, by the way, is the one who created the machine that allowed me to do this. But I remember I wrote all my letters to my family, just in case, all these things. And it was a very introspective moment, obviously, when you go through this. I was young. I had to look around at everybody else that was in this ward. I'm like, what am I doing here? But this is part of what, that's a horrible picture. This is part of what launched the idea behind quick, right, when I did this. Quick is actually an Old English word which means alive and intelligent. Now, I'm alive, I'm not that intelligent, but the content, I hope, is intelligent. And so quick, if you go back in the DNA where like the King James Version of the Bible of, your spirit is quickened. Well, if you go back about 600 years and beyond, you end up with CWIC for quick, right, where you're quickened. And so that's what it's about. That's what quick is. I had this strange, I hope that works. I had this strange habit of going through and actually reading Old English texts and the Bible and the Gospels, etc., in Old English, and that's where that came from. Okay, so now as you see these graphics on this intro, when I first started off with this is starting off in just a little bit after the heart problem here, about a year later. My wife actually decided that I was going to get on YouTube and start talking about things, not just on the website, but I'm going to start talking about things. And she said, you just start doing this. You need to do the YouTube channel. And so I started this YouTube channel, I think it was 2017, and it was called, of course, Mormonato. Practical theology is what I started with. What I want from the audience here, though, is all the oohs and ahs. Okay, all the oohs and ahs from the graphics here that we start off with, okay? Okay.
I want to talk a little bit about Lehi's vision.
Okay, that didn't even go.
Lehi's
I don't know what
dream,
happened
as
here.
it's usually referred to.
This video here, hopefully the next one's work. This video here was called Lehi's fiery darts, right? And so I just kind of went through an explanation of what I thought this was really doing. I brought in some Greek ideas. I brought in the cherubim, right? I've got an idea of what these fiery darts really are, as they represent a lot of something very similar to what the cherubim are actually. And that was it. That was in this little study room in one of our houses. Put it up there, had a little Blue Yeti mic, and my Mormonato intro.
One of the parts of the dream has to do with what Nephi says is the fiery darts of the adversary.
Okay. Moving beyond that, we evolved a little bit. There's the graphics. Look at that. No sound. All right. Shocked.
I want to talk a little bit about Lehi's vision. Lehi.
That might be the same thing. I don't know. Okay. Then what I wanted to do, and this goes more along the lines of what I ended up doing as far as the content goes, is I've always liked to have with my kids like really in-depth discussions. Right? And so at dinner time, we would go into all of these issues, even when they were young. And as they grew up, we'd keep going, and this was a natural thing for us to talk about. We'd just bring up a different issue. It could be an LGBTQ issue. It could be a current event. It could be a political issue. And we kind of dissect it and go back, and oftentimes we play the devil's advocate back and forth with each other. So my idea here was, well, I'm just going to throw down a microphone down in the middle of the table and have everybody listen to my family's dinner talk, our discussion during dinner. And I put it out there. In fact, that was interesting because I had one woman who contacted me very upset at some of my opinions later on. And I'm closed-minded, I'm misogynist, and all these other things. And I said, if you would just go back to my earliest videos and listen to this, I hope you have a different idea of things. And how she was making remarks about my kids and my wife. I feel sorry for them, that kind of thing. Just go back and listen to this. Ooh, ah. Yeah. All right. You see, that's the dinner table down there. See how clever that is?
What are family dinners like at your house? At my house, I've always encouraged lively debate and discussion. Even when the kids were young, we would talk about their experiences, put them into a larger social context, and see what those experiences meant spiritually. My goal was always to make the kids think. Today, my kids are almost all adults, so some of the topics have changed, and of course, their experience and insight have changed too. After all, they're millennials. And so our dinner discussions now have the added benefit of two different points of view from one generation to another. I had the idea of slapping down a microphone in the middle of the kitchen table to record some of these dinner discussions. So I'm inviting you into dinner. Take a seat and enjoy.
Okay. Okay, so that, ooh, now we're getting something else. Hold on. Okay. Now notice here, we've got a different logo. We have now moved to Quick, right at this point. So similar to Midnight Mormons, I was like, okay, well, President Nelson doesn't want us to use the word Mormon anymore. So Mormonato's out. I got to remove that. I got to take that out, and we're going to go with something else. And again, that's kind of from the idea of the heart issue and staying alive, we went with Quick. This is an early example of Come Follow Me. When I first started, I was like, okay, those dinner discussions with my kids, that's what I wanted the channel to kind of be like. That's the idea of what I want to talk about, these cultural issues, these gospel issues, looking at things through a gospel filter that are happening today. And this is right when Come Follow Me was coming out. And so my wife says, no, you need to do Come Follow Me. So that January, I started with Come Follow Me. I did all 4 years. If you've ever gone back in the channel and looked, I've got all 4 years in there of Come Follow Me. I was one of the early adopters, started right in January, and loved it, right? It was great going back in and looking at all of the scriptures and giving a little lesson. And I would go through and I would do 2 parts for each of these. We don't want to get there yet. Okay. So this is the other music.
Okay, so this is the Come Follow Me lesson for the New Testament, which focuses on Matthew 3, Mark 1, and Luke 3, called Prepare Ye the Way of the Lord. The focus of this is on John the Baptist. What we want to look at here is being created,
so
but
no
rather...
Video. This one was just audio. Why? Because I couldn't find the video. I don't know what had happened to the recording. Technical issues, didn't know. I thought I'd move on. We graduated from this, and we moved on to a different studio. We actually moved houses. And so I went to a different house and had to set up a studio, which was not set up yet. But I thought, I'm going to do this Easter series. And so I'm going to set a backdrop.
All right, this is episode 1 of our Easter and Holy Week series. This is Palm Sunday.
Very Eastery, that was my point. Yeah, so those are punk and alternative rock albums on the side. I thought this is the perfect backdrop and setting for an Easter series and for my Come Follow Me series. But that's what was up on the wall when I had done this, so that's what we started with. That Easter series is up on there also. Now, coming back, again, what do I know about what I'm doing? Not a whole lot. Absolute ignorance. And this is absolute ignorance. This is me when I'm young. I have no idea what's in store for me in life. I think I'm cool, I'm not. And I don't know what Quick Media will eventually come around and what it's going to mean and the opposition, quite frankly, that we've faced with this. This is one of my first studio interviews. Right. Okay, now notice the logo on that. It's a little bit different. We've got the right music going. I still use the same music today. Okay, so it's a snake. It looks like it is a snake. So that was the original idea when I did the circle, but I thought, well, I'm not going to put that up there. I am enamored with the Nehushtan, with the brazen serpent. It's always meant so much to me as an icon for the Savior. And if you go back into Egyptian religion, you'll see this. It's all over the place. It's obvious. This is part of an idea of what is coming out from the culture with Moses as he comes out of Egypt into the wilderness with the brazen serpent. The 2 snakes, right, where you have the good snake and the bad snake is the exact same thing that you get in an alternative to the Book of the Dead, which is the Book of the Gates. It's very interesting. To me, you cannot understand really fully the context of the Old Testament without understanding the Egyptian religion and their culture. It's all over the place in the Old Testament. Nibley, in his book, has got that Ouroboros, right, that's in there. And oftentimes it's used as a pagan symbol. But to me, I saw that as this is the brazen serpent. And this is one eternal round. And this podcast is about the circumscribing all truth into one whole, right? Like we get in the Book of Mormon. It's one eternal round. And so that was the idea of that. I had some pushback on it, so I'm like, well, maybe I better not leave that up there. So I changed it a little bit. Well, I'll get to that in a minute, I guess.
So, Christina, let's talk polygamy.
Let's talk about polygamy.
First of all, I wanted to get an idea of what brought.
Okay, so this is my first Zoom interview that I did, and then when I started interviewing scholars, she's a non-member, she's a Catholic now, she's married to a Catholic, but she was very involved in that world of Mormon studies, Christina Rossetti. I interviewed her a couple of times, and I started interviewing a lot of different scholars. I had Ben Spackman on, I had Stephen Smoot on, I had Jeffrey Thane. Boy, I'm missing so many of them, but I started really getting into interviewing all of the scholars. The Zoom I couldn't really figure out or understand. It was always one screen or the other. It was either them or me. I never had them both up at the same time. But I was trying to figure out the technology and how to work this. And what I wanted to do was set a basis to say, okay, my background, my study is, I can put myself in a position where I am credible enough to talk to these individuals, right? I wanted to lay down that foundation for the future, which I think has ended up going pretty well. There's Stephen. I even got, you'll notice this guy. I'm not sure I'd say scholar on this.
That's now an expectation that's put on Latter-day Saints. At some point, the stacks become so much. It's everyone's telling me I'm wrong. The culture isn't on my side.
Okay, so I had Kwaku on. I was starting to get more into the cultural side. I wanted to get more into information about BYU. My daughter was at BYU, and so I wanted to get a little bit more background from his perspective of what was going on at BYU. We're going to get into that in a minute. Okay, this is James Lindsay. He's a non-member. You'll notice if you follow my program at all, I will interview a lot of people that have nothing to do with Latter-day Saints. Nothing to do with the gospel, so to speak, but I'm doing it from a perspective of a Latter-day Saint, right? I want to bring that information in and filter it through a gospel lens. So James Lindsay is very, very well known online in the especially on X, in talking about things like social justice and Marxism and all these different things. And so I'll interview him. I've interviewed a lot of scholars on these types of topics as well and bring those in without even a reference ever to a Latter-day Saint vernacular or principle necessarily. And if I do, they obviously don't know what I'm talking about. But I typically choose people to interview that I have an interest in. I want to have an interest in it. I want to have a passion for it. So when you are watching Quick Media, you're basically seeing what's in my brain, right? You're seeing what's in my brain, and I'm doing what I want to do. I'm not worried about the clicks. I'm not worried about the brand. I want the brand to be me. And as my wife says, if you meet me, talk to me. When you're watching these things and these interviews or my commentaries, I'm going through the commentary, you're meeting me. You really are. There's no facade there. I'm not different. That is what I'm interested in. That is what I feel. And that's my persona that's up there. Okay, we graduate a little bit on these studios.
So this is the Come Follow Me series. This episode is entitled, He Taught Them as One Having Authority. And this is focused on Matthew 6 and 7. It is the continuation of the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to focus on three things here. Number one is the Lord's Prayer. We'll have a unique look at that. Secondly, the Golden Rule is taught here, but we're going to talk about what we might call the Platinum Rule as well that Jesus covers here.
And also, we're going to talk
interested to see
about
what the
Peter
intro is on this.
and the rock and what this might really mean. Here we go.
Okay. All right. So we move beyond. I do this for a while in this studio. And then anyone who has followed Quick Media, you'll notice that I do certain things I have certain slogans that I talk about, the cultural side of things and the gospel issues. I'll talk a lot about. And I'm working on a book, by the way, Dave and Hayden and Jackson, called The Interpreters, that has these different filters, these different lenses to look at the gospel through. And so, for example, one is the higher and the lower law. What does it mean to have the higher law and the lower law? What does it mean to have a royal procession? As I look through a filter of a royal procession of Christ being the king, when he's mentioned over and over and over again as the king in the last week of his life, what does that mean? In my mind, I see that as exactly what we're going through when we go through the temple. We are going through the last week of Jesus' life. We are starting off as kings and queens and priests and priestesses, just like Christ, and coming in through the east gate. It's a tradition. It is a ritual that he is doing there. People know exactly what he's doing. Solomon did the exact same thing. And it's a ritual. It's a coronation, right? It's a royal procession. And so when you see these things through these interpreters, like, for example, prepare ye the way. Well, what's the way? What's the way? Well, if you look at a royal procession, there's a procession that goes from the east gate right to the temple. Make his path straight. Remove the stumbling blocks. Things start to fall into place a little bit more. And so with these interpreters that I have, this is where I taught Come Follow Me with. I would go through the interpreters. I'd talk about them. And I would use the Come Follow Me lesson and say, let's look at this through this idea. This is one example of that, which I call the Nehor principle, which will have is a lot of what I'm going to talk about with the dissenters in my next presentation. So this is a cursory explanation of the Nehor principle. Here we go. Okay. So that's one of the interpreters is the Nehor principle that I would do. I still do that today. If I'm giving commentary, I'm talking about a gospel principle, I will use and reference these interpreters often for the audience that has followed me for quite some time. Okay. Now, in 2020, that's not 2020, but in 2020, I got really sick again, really sick. Had some kidney issues, had some other issues. I was told by a doctor that you're going to go on dialysis very shortly. What I started doing was actually fasting, like long-term fasting, 3 days, 5 days at a time. Put myself into a regime for a couple of years, or pretty solid for a year, a little lighter the next year, and I don't do as good of a job as I used to on that. And that changed all of my labs. I'm telling you, everything changed. They changed for my kidneys, it changed for my blood pressure, it changed an immense amount of things. And yes, I will say that Cardio Miracle had a part of that as well. But at that time, my wife said, we couldn't figure out what was going on. Why is this happening? My dad was on dialysis. He's in his 80s. How am I going to go on dialysis in my early 50s? How can I do that? That's preposterous to me. And my wife said, with all the faith in the world, you need to go sell your business. We have to figure this out. You need to sell your business. And so that may seem as crazy as, well, let's throw an iguana on our head. Or jumping off of an Ecuadorian bridge into a 400-foot ravine. Or fighting a bull in a packed stadium in Spain. But it was a leap of faith. And I had been doing this completely part-time up until then, and decided, okay, fine, we're going to do this. And we did figure it out, right? The Lord guided us and helped us out, mostly from her prayers, I will tell you. And we figured out, okay, this is what the problem is. This is how we're going to help this. This is how we're going to manage all these health issues. And we're going to allow you to go forward. Because, as my wife said, you have to do this. You have a calling. You need to do this. And so we did it. And we made that leap off of the bridge, and I sold the business, and I went into Quick Media full time. There's a lot of different topics that I've covered. This one I've got to be the most careful about. It's interesting because I was one of the first early on in the 2000 teens of covering these difficult, controversial issues. And I felt again, with the strength of the Lord, strength of my wife, and everything else, I said, you know what? These things have to be talked about. And as I started talking about these LGBTQ issues, or I started talking about some of these political issues, or I started talking about what was going on in certain places, I'm like, I would get so much pushback from people and individuals. Now, somehow, for me, it was really hard on my wife. It is today really hard on my wife. I've got a pretty thick skin. And my rule basically is, okay, if someone is mad at me or is swearing at me, if they are, ad hominem attacks at me, I don't typically have a problem as long as it doesn't get to my family and as long as you're not putting words in my mouth and lying about it. Right? If you have a disagreement and you're going to act that way, fine. And I got very, very used to that very fast. From both sides, by the way, both sides of total believing Mormon and an ex-Mormon, both sides of conservative and progressive. Right? Still get hit from all sides of this. And so that's something that we live with on a constant basis. BYU was one of those lightning rods because no one had really done this. Not to this extent. And so I had back in 2012, I had read a book by sociologist Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind. Some of you here may have read that or followed him. And I began to follow him very, very closely after I read his book. I loved the book. But more than the book, what really affected me was following him on YouTube. Because on YouTube, he was at NYU. And he would film a number of his classes and his little conferences that he would have with the students. And he started to film these because he started to see all this massive change in the academy, in the universities across the country. And he didn't know what was going on. It was just all this strange change where the kids were beginning to build their own little kind of community. Everything had to be pure and perfect, sanitized, massive appeal to authority for the president and the administrators of the universities. Eventually, if you've read his further books, you can see in his work, he's gone and found out that much of this was because of the iPhone. It's very interesting, right? In 2008, you come out with the iPhone. In 2012, actually, I think is the year where Facebook at that time got the likes. You started getting the likes. And all of these mental issues, these mental health issues started coming up with young individuals, especially young women. And so that just really got me very interested. I had 2 kids in college. And I started following that very closely. So I had this background of this information. And what I also found that really integrated with all of that was kind of this critical social justice, as many people call this wokeness. I started reading all about postmodernism. I started studying up on critical social justice. I started looking at other philosophies such as Marxism, critical theory especially, which is where you get the critical race theory and a number of different things from. And I started pulling all these things together, looking at the universities especially where all of this was fomenting. And then I started to hear some things about BYU, right? Now, again, I want to make a disclaimer here. I love BYU. I went to BYU. My wife went to BYU. All 4 of my kids went to BYU. My dad was one of the 4 founders of the Cougar Club, along with, kind of honorary, along with Elder Christofferson. And so, I've got a deep love for BYU all the way around. But there were some things that were happening there, and maybe still happen a little bit, right, in a minority of the classes. And so I started paying more attention. These things were being sent to me, and I was being told about all these things, these stories. I was like, wow, this is not just one or two people that are saying something. Something is really happening at this point. And so I decided to start covering that, and I did. And it was interesting because this was the time of BLM, right? The city's burning, George Floyd. It was a time of where there was a lot of focus on the campuses about these massive voices that were being pushed out into our culture and through the news media. And it was COVID eventually that happened quickly after that. And so during COVID, what happened? Well, you may have experienced this with your kids or your grandkids with their parents. They started putting everything on video. And so a lot of parents, they would see exactly what was happening with their kids on video. As their video was coming into their home because they couldn't go to school, and they were being taught, they're like, what is this? And so you started getting some pushback from the parents. Well, they did the same thing at BYU. And so I would go through and I would research all of these videos and go through everything, and I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe some of these things that are being said. And some, and again, we're talking about a small group of certain professors that were there. And it really scared me. It was like, this is a problem. And so I investigated that, went into that a little bit. I actually ended up going to BYU and networking, and I've got a lot of associations with a lot of professors at BYU. Some really like me and some really don't. And then some students. And we ended up putting a group together of large donors, faculty, administration, and students, and we would meet in Provo. And some of you how many here know like Luke Hansen? Okay, Luke Hansen, this is where I met Luke the first time. And he was part of that group. And some of his friends that came in, and they were part of that group. And we would meet, and we would talk about, well, how do we handle this? Can we put out some positive messages that will get to the students? We don't want to disrupt the boat. It's a touchy subject. It's a touchy thing to do because you love the church, you love the institution of BYU, and so it's a very difficult thing to handle. So this became a big thing, a big topic for what Quick Media did for a while, maybe a couple of years, in covering these issues here with BYU. And good news is they've changed quite a bit. Right? They've done a lot of new things. I don't know what's on here. I'm almost afraid to play it. Hold on.
Look at the trend of everything with Coates and with Professor Jennings and all of the references that are coming up here. You see it's all the same thing. It's all coalescing around critical race theory.
And this at the time was a very big topic throughout academia.
But if you look at the trend of everything with
and this became a very strong point for me at this point. And this is something that we discussed with Dinner with Millennials, with my kids a lot, in understanding the war in heaven, because all we're doing is rehearsing the war in heaven over and over and over again. And if you look at the war in heaven, it's pretty interesting to figure out what's going on, right? You've got a side from Heavenly Father's plan that says freedom, liberty, agency. You need to be able to choose, and because that's going to cause problems, I will provide you a Savior, where you still need to choose Him. You still need to choose Him. And the other side is no. And by the way, I'm going to give you different areas that you can end up with based on what you want and how you want to live. And the other side says, that's not great. We want equity, where there's a forced outcome at the end of everything. There's no celestial, terrestrial, right? There's no three kingdoms. That's not fair. So it's a different type of justice that looks at the end instead of the means. And so this became a big focus as well with what we do with Quick Media. And a lot has to do with that concept and that idea of the war in heaven. I started doing a lot of speaking on this around. I've done a couple dozen events where I've spoken. Did a lot of interfaith as well as a big part of what we want to do because this is important to me. Even though, for example, I had a pretty strong reaction with what happened in Michigan. I love other faiths. I've got very close relationships with people in the Church of England, with the SBC, the Southern Baptist Council. Did I say that right? Convention, thank you. Southern Baptist Convention. And other places. I've got, Jeff here, Jeff McCullough with Hello Saints. He's a very, very close friend of mine. We spent a lot of time together. I spent a lot of time with his family in working with him and reviewing the Book of Mormon and doing a number of different things. I've interviewed Del Tackett, who worked with the George W. Bush administration. And I've had, 9 or 10 different episodes with him. I've had non-denominational pastors on. I've had rabbis on. I enjoy doing this part of things. I want to get our name out there more and make it easier to create these bridges to be able to speak with others. How many of you have taken a walk with me before? All right. I love doing this. I need to do it more. I had a friend who is extremely, successful on YouTube. I saw him early on when he was starting his channel, and he was doing these walks around downtown Phoenix. And I thought, I could do that. I think that I've got enough packed into my brain here that I can get out, that I could be lucid and fluent just talking as I go. And so I started doing that as well. And I probably need to do that a little bit more. But I enjoy doing this, just changing it up and doing this quite a bit. There's your picture, Carden. The other thing is, a couple of years ago, I got involved more with Go and Do Travel. And love Brian, love Garrett, and others. I do a lot of work with Bruce Porter. It's a fabulous organization, and so that's taken up a lot of my time the last couple of years. And now I'm traveling about 4 months a year with them. And I love it. It's just like now, I can come and talk to all of you and see all of you. And on these trips, I can do the same thing. On all these trips, I can do the same thing. And that's really meaningful to me. That enriches what I'm doing. I'm not just talking into a camera. And that's why it's so important for me that we have this online community that we can bring together and actually bring everybody face to face. I think it's an important thing. Recently, we just brought on Aranza Condi. Some of you might know her. She's my assistant. She's also a content producer. She's going to have a bigger role. She does a lot of our social media now. She's going to be here next year. We've got a couple of other projects that are in the make that are going to be time-consuming, but they're going to be great. And quick media is a calling for me, and I feel that, right? I feel that. It is important. My wife feels that. We pray about this, and we feel almost a charge, a responsibility. You guys feel a responsibility? I feel a responsibility to make people aware of things. And that's what I want to get out of quick media more than anything else. You decide what you want. Don't believe what I say. Don't believe the things that I bring up, right? Study it out for yourselves and decide whether or not these things are true or not. The gospel is true. The gospel is true. And we need to share it, and we need to live by it. We need to see our life through it. We need to have a framework of mind that is built around the principles of the gospel centered on our Savior Jesus Christ and his atoning sacrifice. And I think we have a responsibility to be able to get that out there. In 2019, there was a fair conference, and I think it was Elder, I want to say Christensen. He came up and he had a Q&A after his talk. It was the first time a general authority had spoken at fair. And someone asked him, well, what about us talking about this? I mean, is it just going to be fair? I mean, who else can actually talk about this outside of the church? And he said, no, we want you to do this. We have FAIR and Mormon Interpreter and Scripture Central and all these places, and everybody else who has a voice needs to get out there and speak on this. And so that's when I saw that, it was like, I'm done. I'm out there. I'm going to get this done, and we're going to talk about it. My wife and I, that's what this is really supposed to be, and that's my story with Quick Media. Appreciate it. Thank you.